Welcome to your online lecture for week 5. This is chapter 4 in your textbook. As usual, it would be most helpful if you would do your reading first, then go through this lecture. I hit the high points and try to emphasize what I think is important in the chapter, plus add quite a few additional concepts and stories that I hope you'll find interesting. But let me take a moment to emphasize that you really do need to do all of your reading. The text has some good basic information for you to know as you go through your college career and into work. Just about everyone who goes to college takes a similar course to this. I've said this before. So you're all kind of learning the same concepts about communication in much the same way as we all learn the rules of driving, and it makes things run much more smoothly on the roads. Communication in your work world will run much more smoothly for you if you know the rules or concepts that everyone else is operating under. So please read your textbook. All right, well, let's jump in. Here is what we're going to cover this lecture. There are quite a few things not covered in your text, so please listen carefully and take some notes because I'll pull from this lecture and your textbook for the quiz. All right. We will cover don't assume, ask for clarification, the power of language, will you just go with the status quo, and should you always choose power? Our first concept, don't assume. Misunderstandings happen when you think everyone else uses words in the same way that you do. When you begin a discussion about an issue or a controversial topic, take a few moments to clarify or define what you mean about certain terms, or at least stop to consider how the other person or people might interpret what you're saying. I'd like to pull an excerpt from a lecture that a friend of mine did for a communication class at Biola University in Southern California. Now, this is Dr. Tim Muehlhoff. I think you'll find his explanation of this concept interesting and somewhat entertaining as well. He does such a great job of using stories as an example. Now, this is a concept, the use of stories, that we're going to talk about quite a bit when we get to the public speaking component of this course. So please notice how he uses those stories as illustrations. This excerpt runs about 5 minutes, so relax and enjoy.
When you speak to a person, it's systemic. You walk into a person's system of meaning. All of it's related. How did they come up with that system of meaning? Well, they grew up in a particular family. They grew up in a particular part of the United States, or they're international. So when you talk to a person, you're talking to their gender, you're talking to their ethnic background, you're talking to their educational background. You have just entered into their system of meaning. It's systemic. It's all interrelated. So sometimes you'll say a word that is just grossly misinterpreted. My wife and I speak for family life conferences, these marriage conferences. And in these conferences, when we're done, every speaker is evaluated by a random sampling of the audience just to see how the speaker is doing. I was very surprised one day when I got a comment that said, hey, really like the conference. I was kind of surprised that the speaker was using semi-inappropriate language. And I was like, what in the world? Well, she wrote down the word that I had said. She said, when he used the word asinine, I just thought that that was inappropriate. And I'm going, what? That's not a swear word. Asinine is not a swear word. Well, my wife said to me wisely, honey, maybe you better stop saying it. And I said, no. Got another evaluation from another conference. Yeah, kind of surprised to see the speaker using blue language when he said the word asinine. I was like, that's asinine. This is, you know what I mean? That is not what that word means. That is a perfectly legitimate word. It's not a swear word. It's not. But then I thought about one time what Mark Twain said. When one person calls you an ass, ignore it. If 2 people call you an ass, buy a saddle. Okay? So I'm up here using a word that is clearly distracting to some of the audience members. Now, that word does not mean that. Okay? But for some people, it's a swear word. So as a good communicator, I'm speaking into their system of meaning. I need to evaluate it not as I'm using it, but as they hear it. Now let me give you a little bit more of a sober illustration. there was a high school teacher, elementary school teacher who was white teaching in a predominantly black elementary school. She passed out what my kids got all through elementary school, and those were your vocabulary words, your spelling words that you're going to be tested on. One word she gave out was the word niggardly. Now, who knows what the word niggardly actually means in the dictionary? What does the word niggardly mean? Stingy. Okay, to use properly, hey, don't be so niggardly, next time buy lunch. Okay? So that's what the word means. A lot of parents, African American parents, were deeply offended. Why? Because the word had a negative connotation. I suppose if niggardly meant heroic, some people wouldn't have had a problem with it. But it didn't. It had a stingy. So they were upset enough that they approached the principal and said, what kind of teacher do you have that could not understand that the word niggardly would have negative connotations, and she's passing it out to African American students? Do you know she lost her job? Okay? Now, those words are important. By the way, same thing happened in politics. One of the staff of a mayor of Washington used the word publicly, and he was dismissed. Now, by the way, I've shared that with some people and had people get really upset. And they're like, that's ridiculous. That's political correctness to run amok. Okay? But the fact is, when I say a word, it goes into your system of meaning. And as a good communicator, I probably should know a little bit what your system of meaning is. When we went to Lithuania for a year, you can't treat Lithuanians the same way you treat Americans. Different systems of meaning. So a huge part of communication is to say, how did you just use that word, and what does it mean to you? A funny story, I once said to Noreen, quite casually, I told her I loved her when we were dating. It was actually in the midst of an argument, and I said, listen, you really frustrate me, but I know I love you, and that was it. I'd never said that word to her before. She went home and semi-wigged out, because to her, love is synonymous with the word marriage. I went home, talked to my roommate, Athletes in Action staff, sat down with him and said, he said, yeah, what's the matter? I said, Noreen and I had an argument, blah, blah. I think it's okay because I told her I loved her. John was like, what did you say to her? I said, well, I loved her. And he goes, what do you mean by that? And I was like, what are you getting so worked up about? He goes, Tim, the word love, you don't throw that out to a woman. He said, no, what did you mean by that? And I said, it means I like you a lot. And he was like, I bet you she didn't hear it that way. And it wigged out Noreen. She was like, I'm not ready to get married. I'm like, I'm not either. I like you a lot. You know, kind of a thing. So those words are only partially yours. Because when you give them to another person, they take that word and they interpret it.
Okay, so Tim Muehlhoff, I hope you found him kind of interesting. He's actually a really funny person to be around. But very interesting examples I thought that he used. It's important to understand how other people are hearing your words. Now, you might not find certain words offensive, and the offense might even be the result of a misunderstanding of what the word really means. But does it matter? If it communicates something ugly to another person, it essentially is ugly, or at least to them, right? And as communicators, that should matter to us. So that covers don't assume, ask for clarification. Now, let's talk about the power of language. Understand that your words have power. They have the power to elevate. They have the power to denigrate. They have the power to advance stereotypes. Just an example, several years ago, it was popular to say, it's all good. Well, I did not appreciate that phrase. No matter what had just happened or how hurtful or hateful somebody had just been, somebody would always say, it's all good. I actually annoyed my children by saying to them and their friends, you know, really, it's not all good. There are some things in this world that really are not good. You know, they're wrong, they're unjust, they're evil. It's not all good. And they'd look at me like I was a lunatic. But I really believe that words have power. And behind that phrase was a philosophy that somehow, cosmically, everything worked out for good for everyone in one way or another. No matter who they were, no matter what they did, it all would just work out. Well, in my understanding, that takes us off the hook to do anything about wrongs or injustice or lies or greed. It just takes us off the hook. If it's all good, then we just have to wait around to see that it's all going to turn out just fine. Words are powerful, so we need to watch what we say to ourselves and to each other, even in just very casual conversation like that. Let's talk about the power of language as far as the capital L language. Now, in this instance, I'm talking about language as in English, French, Swahili, or Bengali, okay? That kind of language. And I'm going to get a little deep with you guys here, so please just hang with me, all right? But let's say you wanted to write a paper or book that you hoped would transform the world. What language would you choose? Well, most people, especially Americans, would say English because it is more universally known and understood. Even many people from other countries would say English. But if you study post-colonial theory, which I have, and I love that class, they talk about heart language. And of course, there are those among us who are not Americans, and they're going to probably understand what I'm saying a little bit better, but I think it's important for us to try to understand this. How important it is for people with big ideas to write about those ideas in their heart language, even if it is an obscure dialect. Because to some people, even the act of writing in what's considered to be a more powerful language denigrates or degrades their heart language, or at least fails to give that language the respect it's due. Now, I'm getting kind of deep here, but I want you to see how powerful even the language as in a dialect is that you choose to speak or write in. So just the choice of which language to write in actually is very important. The author of our textbook contends that certain versions of English are more credible and imply higher status than others. Do you believe that? Is formal Massachusetts English more commanding of respect than, say, Louisiana Cajun, or some other race or regionalized vernacular, such as African American vernacular or very Southern vernacular? Is the English spoken by the King and Queen of England a more credible, higher status version of the language than, say, Cockney? English spoken without a regional accent does appear to be more credible if you judge it by the fact that most newscasters speak in that way, right? A very standard English. When we watch commercials, generally it's a very standard version of English being spoken, unless they are targeting a very specific audience. So it probably is safe to say that our society as a whole places more credibility on a standard of English without slang or regional dialect. I think we can safely say that. All right, let's talk about the status quo. The question is, do you choose to change the way you talk so that you come across as someone who is more in the mainstream and fits in, or do you choose to keep your style of language but elevate it by speaking powerfully and intelligently and reasonably in that style? Now, I'm asking this question for you to think about. I'm not suggesting on your next job interview that you throw in every slang expression you might use when talking to your friends or family. You'll probably not get the job. I am suggesting that you try to understand the quandary that people from other cultures may feel when it is suggested that they must master English or that they must publish in English, that their heart language is not sufficient. And I would like for you to consider what it's like for people who speak a vernacular in their homes, which is not considered acceptable to speak in a classroom or a job interview. How would that feel? To know that you have to talk one way at work and school and another at home and with your friends. Is that a problem? Perhaps we are all so multicultural these days that we can shift in and out of these worlds with ease. No big deal. Okay, let's kind of recap. So if we understand that language is powerful, okay, and that certain languages in our world appear to have more power than others, and then within those languages, some dialects or styles are considered more powerful and credible, then it only makes sense that there are words which can make you appear more powerful, and credible, and trustworthy. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. Your textbook does a good job with this, so please make sure to read that part where he's talking about the differences between powerful and powerless language. But I will say this about it. Do you always choose power? Do you always choose power language? If you know what power language is, if you know what the power words are, do you always choose power? Is that the best strategy? Or are there times when you choose less powerful language to disarm someone, to not appear rude, to be less likely to irritate people when you interrupt them? Let me tell you a story that happened where my daughter works. She's 26 years old. She works at a trailer production company in the Los Angeles area. I think I've mentioned that before. She's an editor at a company that makes movie trailers and commercials. Pretty cool job. Well, there's a young man there who always irritates people. He had no people skills, and no matter how hard he tried, people always groaned inside when he came into their office to discuss a project. Well, they got a new manager, and he observed this and suggested to this young man that whenever he enters a room, he begins with the question, "Are you busy?" If they say yes, just go back later. But almost always, this young man discovered, they would say, no, I guess not. Come on in. That, which would not be considered power words or power language, completely changed his interactions with his coworkers. Why? His new choice of language was disarming and less offensive, albeit less powerful, right? Well, this idea is even more important for young people just entering a new job. Sometimes you think you know it all, and frankly, sometimes you do. But choosing less powerful, more humble speech may help you as you get your bearings and find advocates in your workplace. Women, you have a different consideration. There is quite a bit of research that suggests that the same power speech that makes a man appear to be credible and authoritative is often attributed to women as being bossy and overbearing. Been there, done that. Sorry, girls. We have come a long way, baby, but many things are still different for women in the marketplace these days. Now, I will say if you're trying to, quote, act like a man so you'll be respected like the men in your office, you're on the wrong track. I will say that from experience as well. Perfecting your own personal, authentic style of communication is always a better strategy, no matter what your gender, race, or age. There is no one-size-fits-all in communication styles. By trial and error, we all have to figure it out. Sorry, folks, no shortcuts there. Even when you think you have it all figured out, you'll continue to be amazed at the mistakes that you're going to make. And again, speaking from experience here, and how well we all don't communicate with each other. So just welcome to the club. Learn the lessons and soldier on. I hope you have a great week.